shown twice at the Sharjah Biennale and 3 times at the Sharjah Biennale and Documenta, and currently at the Documenta. And in fact, are probably on the panel the only artists who actually follow this contribution to the Lab of Artistic and Intellectual Inquiry, because they won a production grant last year, at the last Biennale, which has enabled them to finish their work, which started as Warfage and Radio Mina in 2010? Nine. And has now led to a large-scale project, which they will discuss with us. Thank you.
So we're going to try and describe two sets of situations. The first part of it responds a bit to the title of the panel, which is the passing through certain ideological states, which in the context of one of the places I'm trying to describe is, this is a poster that's actually still on the wall of Afghan Films. It's from looking out from 1982 into the Russian future or the Soviet future of Afghan film. So that everything you see there is the Afghan Film Studio, which looks a bit like a city, of course. And what actually exists there looks very little like this, and what we propose looks even more unlike this in some ways, or has implications for what it looks like. And the second situation that we're going to describe is one from Sharjah. This is Sharjah in 2025. It's an image that is not displayed publicly in the Sharjah Biennial Office, but is very much in circulation. It is Shuruk's plan for the so-called Heart of Sharjah project, which creates a kind of de-densification of the center core of the city, which is common also in other Gulf cities, a kind of turning away from a maritime history and producing basically fake urban history, but also has to do with obviously a different sense of what progress means, and is also colored by a kind of very strong nationalist Arab nostalgic reproduction, which is also something to be challenged in a completely different way. So the qualities we're trying to describe in what we did is a kind of very loose relationship with the events, the specific events in these places and the time frames that they were occupying. And that's more like something that was stretched across, in this case, in the first case, carried along by the medium of film, and the second case carried along by the medium of boats, more or less, across certain geographies that were proximate, across many years, and in that sense also across curatorial intentions, biennial frameworks, and so on. So a quick side note on the title of this talk, which we had a little bit of discussion with Geeta about. It was called the Part of Yes Part, and it's nothing to do with pushing Rancière's statement under a bus or something. It's really, it's not to throw away the political power of the statement, the part of no part, but it's rather to think about it as an expression of some of our experiences here and elsewhere. One is that it's increasingly hard to describe any given situation in terms of the metaphor of being counted within or counted out, right? Because the kinds of forces at play that we are discovering also for ourselves is that there's a whole range from like super weak links to really strong influences, inductions, attractions, and so on, which cannot be described through this metaphor. And in terms of kind of domains of knowledge or something, you could say that, for example, a problem that Moinak Biswas really recently pointed out in Jadavpur in a film conference was that, so is the social life of the tailor who makes the costumes in a certain part of film history part of film studies? And art doesn't necessarily have to respond to such kind of domain questions, right? And so the question becomes much more about what is the path that you're taking, what are you passing through, and what are the parts in that sense which have to be passed through. So, and the second kind of sense is that if one is already privileged in being able to ask to participate in certain contexts, then of course it's a very similar situation to what in software is called privilege escalation, right? How do you escalate this privilege into exposing previously closed paths also for oneself, one's own thinking, and for others. So in this part of yes, part kind of joke that we're playing, one could think of more positively, perhaps, the role of, as I will show briefly, the role of a Bombay film technician, for example, in the construction of a whole set of projects within the context of Documenta, where in fact the whole of the Afghan film project had to pass through his expertise and his experience. Yeah? So, and the side note maybe here is that we're working with things that are not concepts. So maybe to respond to Shraddha's, I mean, the part about no concept is, the important part about that in Documenta's context that I understood it was not the no part, it was the concept part. So you're denying that the concept is the mode of thought that is produced, and maybe there's some other kind of shape of thought that is actually the interesting part. And that also means that maybe catastrophe isn't also the horizon of what is one looking at, and maybe the description of this line of movement doesn't necessitate those sense of horizons. And we can respond to that in different ways. But so if one is describing a film, for example, which could be a thought exercise, then one is thinking really as a matter of re-understanding kind of montage, right? We are looking at a way of seeing the cuts, not as walls, but as jumps, as matters of continuity, of producing continuity despite its impossibility in a physical sense, right? And if one is describing a kind of interventionist circuit design, then there's a question of how to create new loops in which things and their values could circulate and are experienced outside of, how they are experienced normally. And in both cases, we're talking really not of a kind of mechanical act, but about something that is full of all kinds of, for us, aesthetic encounters.
I just want to just clarify something, because I think that went missing in Pooja's sort of introduction to what we're talking about. We were asked quite specifically by Geeta to speak about a part of our participation in Documenta, which was the workshops in Kabul, and ours took place in Afghan Films, which is the film archive, but also the National Film Commissioning Agency that was established in 1968 in Kabul. Now, our encounter with Kabul's Documenta was first through a series of apocryphal tales or myths. The first one, I'm sure a lot of you here have heard. It has to do with the smartphone era. The curator's phone, the curator of Documenta, the curator's phone autocorrects Castle to Kabul, and off to Kabul she goes, and subsequently to other places, beginning with the phonetic Ka, Cairo, Castle, of course, Kabul, and then to Canada. From these places then emerge the 4 curatorial categories, which are somehow mirrored in Jivesh's problematic that he goes on to raise. But the 4 curatorial categories then were on stage, under siege, in a state of hope, and on retreat. So you're on stage in Castle, you're under siege in Kabul, you're in a state of hope in Cairo, and on retreat at the Banff Center in Canada. So if Kolkata was still Calcutta, I wonder what would have happened. The second more widespread myth that, and this is in the run-up to, or in, quite a few months before we were even asked to participate in the Kabul seminars. These were the myths and apocryphal tales doing the rounds. The second more widespread myth was that the Taliban had destroyed the entire Afghan films archive. And against this myth, we encountered another one, and one that we rather liked, that the entire negative archive was actually intact, protected by a loving and loyal staff that had worked as government employees at Afghan Films since the late 70s through all the various upheavals. When the Taliban occupied Kabul and came calling, they hid close to 3,000 reels behind false walls, under tables, kept the place dark, blamed power cuts, stuck pictures of Mullah Omar all over the doors, and handed them some old positive prints to burn, which they did. we did learn when we went to Kabul that the entire negative archive was indeed intact. So our affirmation or yes to go to Kabul, and we know a lot of fellow artists who chose not to go, clearly because you were walking into all sorts of problematics. And I think the most primary, simple, and perhaps the most innocuous one is this idea of aid. Whether it's international aid in the larger sense, or here that artists and this culture capital will help repair the city under siege in some way. And Carolyn actually drew direct parallels to what Documenta does for Kassel post-World War II. So this is quite a problematic terrain to go into. Apparently the names, it was changed from Kabul workshops to Kabul seminars because workshop was sounding too pedantic and top-down, and seminars meant some kind, I don't know. Anyway, we decided to take the flight. Speaking of aid, Afghan Films had already inherited some form of this aid. In 2003, while Siddiq Barmak was the director of Afghan Films, he got a phone call to inform him that a telecine machine, that's film to video transfer, a telecine machine had been airdropped courtesy INA, that's the French National Audiovisual Institute, on a military plane. Despite several attempts at refusing their charity, Barmak had to accept this old refurbished Spirit BDL, a machine we later learned via its head office in Germany had stopped manufacture of all parts in 1989 and all service by 1995. This machine stopped working within less than a year in Kabul. And by 2004, only some 20 hours had been digitized. When we stepped in, any idea of beginning to even work within that archive meant we had to somehow be able to digitize this footage, and calls to Germany revealed that you just can't repair this machine. Why don't you buy a refurbished scanner instead? Which could have been possible because you should be digitally scanning films, but we were told by Documenta that there isn't any budget for this and let's do it the Arte Povera way. So Vijay Chavan, the film technician, as Ashok mentioned, is found in Bombay. And Ashok.
In March of 2012, or the year 1390, if you're following the Afghan calendar, just after Navroz, Vijay Chavan and myself traveled to Kabul in the first leg of our workshop. So the first week is really like a technical workshop, which is a sense of repairing and recycling this used French equipment dated from the 1990s. Here's a little sense of what that means. It was actually in quite decent condition with a few broken parts. And this is the sense of also in terms of histories of factories and so on. This is the sense of like the machine itself as having a kind of functional memory, right, that is not completely disappeared. So it's the idea of the archive of the machine as a functional thing rather than of the archive that we were going to deal with, that is the film archive. About 10 days later, and there were other machines. And we got into this really interesting, and for many of the people involved in Afghan film, a kind of hopeful process of reworking this machinery in relation to a couple of computers that we had set up. So about 10 days later, Shaina and Faiza from Bombay and Mariam Ghani, who Shruta mentioned earlier, who was our host in Kabul and in some ways initiator of the project with her father, began to work on a 2-week workshop in Afghan film. A kind of registry was compiled in English from many different kinds of ledgers that existed, and a local instance of Padma's software was set up to receive this new material. What we were having, in a sense, as an experience, I think, was a really extremely virtual, or if you like, vicarious experience of the city of Kabul across its historical and ideological landscapes from the center of Kabul, but now without any access to that history. And it was something that was happening, of course, through the archive material, but also through the people there, many of whom have experienced this full range of political and ideological shifts, and have managed to through them, produce something which we were extremely curious about, which filled somehow this archive. A few quick examples of the kind of material that we were working with. This is the first newsreel produced after the new Republic formed, and these are scenes from 1979 of the public entering the palace, the city palace, for the first time.
ومن آگاه و نهید خلقو چه خپل دوستان و دشمنان ستیجند یو زرو دریس و پندوسم کال
This is a year later when the color of the landscape also has changed dramatically. The Jashrans or the national parades are different in character. And around the late 70s and the early 80s, these kind of very drastic changes in the visual perception of Kabul streets is quite incredible, actually. These are all newsreels. This is from 1980. Also 1980. A Jashan parade. And this has a red tint from a stuck color wheel that didn't refuse to move, that we corrected later. I put this clip in because there was an earlier clip which hasn't shown up, which is about the use in fiction films of that time of these events and the whole kind of cultural landscape in Kabul, including music performances and so on, being appropriated into fictional narrative. This was the basic purpose of This is like an eagle story about a girl traveling to Kabul and discovering this place.
در اینجا استاد رحیم بخش مشغول تدریس موسیقی برای شاگردان کورس دیده می شود.
All these are translated and then these fiction films which are made, you can sense a sense of friendship and proximity with the actors. Many of the actors, Shaina will explain later, were part of the workshop. because we were trying to re-go over a certain kind of form of film making, film history, relationship with documentary practices, relationship with newsreel, and so on. And then we found these kind of visible examples of people who obviously knew each other and were making films together. This is from a fiction film called, which is about a sculptor, and this is the wedding scene, and you see him briefly in it. Which year is?
1974. It's called The Sculptures Are Laughing.
And there is a Dari name which is a bit more complicated, which I can tell you a bit later. So, inspired by such images, I sat up one night and cut a 40-minute film that we later called Audiences and Crowds in the Afghan Film Archive, which was actually shown in an outdoor screening in Shahrinaw near the end of our exhibition in Kabul, and was subsequently shown in Kassel and then also in Bombay and so on, which is probably...
Shahrinaw is a park in the city center, and it was actually called Cinema Park and had a cinema within it that ran Ramsay type Hindi movies, old prints. Sorry.
And that was probably one of the smaller time periods anybody has spent on a documenta piece, but that's kind of what happened. It was done in one night. And then this kind of activity that we, so there were many things going on, but this particular, for example, the outdoor film screening was kind of happened through and was kind of encouraged by something called the Mobile Film Unit in Afghan Film, which is really a group of people who had a lot of mobile equipment but had not used it for maybe 7 or 8 years. So what we thought as an atmosphere would, I mean, from our few forays into Kabul city would have been, what we thought would have been impossible for a whole range of reasons, turned out to be totally possible. And we showed this together with another film which Shaina can quickly describe.
Yeah, I mean, just a side story. On day, a part of Documenta's Kassel seminars was apparently this tea ceremony where we had to all meet at the one hotel and drink tea and commence the seminars, and we never did that. So we'd have our chai, Sarkari style, with many breaks in the Afghan Films office, and we'd have these early morning meetings because office hours Afghan Film was open 8 to 3 p.m. And on the first day itself, we asked a lot of questions about this mobile cinema, what happened to it, because earlier the newsreels traveled all the 22 provinces, the Afghan Film newsreels and so on. Now, on the third last day of the workshop, the director comes up to me and says, I believe you want to do a public screening of material that you all have digitized. And I'm like, huh? But I'm quick on the uptake, and I say, sure, why not? And he says, well, this is what Azim Jan has told me, the guy in charge of mobile cinema, that you have requested this. Of course, mumkin. And he encouraged us to make this film. We said, then can we edit this film that represents the spectator and audiences and crowds through the archive? And he said, yes. And he said, and you must show House of History. This is really important for the people of Kabul because they've actually not seen it. And Khan-e-Tariq was made in 1996 at the height of the Civil War, when just various, I mean, there was just, Kabul was completely under siege from the north, from the south, from all sides. And the staff came to Afghan Films. It stayed open, but obviously there was nothing officially produced as a film commissioned by Afghan Films. And Kader Tahiri comes and sits there and uses the equipment, culls through the archive, finds material from the 60s, actually filmed by this Indian cinematographer called Sonaram Talwar, who goes from FTI there and ends up training almost everybody who's then doing camera in the 70s. So it's an essay film, and it's called House of History, and it ends with images of the Kabul Museum that's been destroyed. A very beautiful film, and when Mariam heard about this, she said, "Oh, we'll have to go and ask the culture minister," and so on and so on. And you know, Mariam's still very American in that sense, and the director of the Afghan film said, "Rubbish, we're just going to do this." So there are ways through this. I mean, the material has entered the archive and the public domain without any, jama karoing to the Ministry of Culture in Afghanistan for viewing or censoring. The annotations are quite political in nature. It's all there. No, that's just an aside. But I'll quickly fast forward. But the image that I still retain of these two, 2 weeks that just go by, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. with the Sarkari chai and lunch breaks included, was of a quirky clockwork of wheels and reels whirring together, and everybody buzzing because these images were coming out of boxes and were being moved from film grain to pixel in real time, and were being gazed at and being brought to life by the entire staff. You have to realize these films had not been seen and these newsreels. So we had to cherry pick. And I think one of our first things was to get one of the Goethe Institute assistants who was